Hi everyone, Kasia Zmokla from Digital Art Classes here. Today we will take this raw file and we will work towards black and white conversion. This might seem like a lot, but believe me, the workflow is pretty straightforward. So let's get started. Okay, so let's begin. Let me just switch off the before and after and let's actually take a quick look at the before. So this is the original image. I have recently played quite a lot with my archives, and as you can see, this image has a lot of potential, but to be honest, the white balance is totally off. The image is very badly lit. I haven't used any lighting. This was only the natural light. I have taken this image in the evening. This was pretty spontaneous image. So I really like the moment. I like the atmosphere. I like the memory, but basically the image is bad. So I was playing around, I was working with those old images and with those portraits. What I really like doing is creating black and white conversion, so that way I don't have to focus that much on color. In fact, I don't have to focus on color at all, and I can focus entirely on luminosity adjustments. I can take a look at all these beautiful textures and I can play with light and shadow. And this is what we are going to do exactly today. Okay, so let's take our image. I'm going to create new variant and we will start from scratch, from the very beginning. Okay, so the image disappeared. It will be here, so known, and let's just grab the original one and let's mark it with blue. Okay, so now if we go here, we will have two images. So as you can see, first we have to turn the image to the left. So I'm hitting Alt, Command and L on my keyboard, and we will start working with this picture. So as the very first step, I'm just going to apply auto levels. So we don't need to worry about color at all. We can apply the automatic black and white conversion right from the beginning, but super important in case of black and white conversion specifically and always is setting the luminosity levels just right. So the very first thing I'm going to do is to just jump here to the exposure tab and I'm just going to apply the auto levels. So here simply click on the second icon and that way Capture One automatically adjusted levels. And the next thing I'm going to do is to take a look at base characteristics. So by default, Capture One will always apply the auto curves. So it recognized the camera and it applied the auto curve. And I'm going to take a look how it will look like with the portrait. So there's not much of a difference, but I feel that the portrait is a little bit softer and there is a little bit more nuances in the skin. If we go for auto, this is a little bit more contrasty. So typically I would start with portrait. So these two adjustments I'm applying on the background layer. There is no need to create new layers at this point. And the very last thing, and actually the crucial in case of this tutorial, is to turn the image into black and white. So let's move over to the color tab, and here at the almost very bottom we have the black and white tool, and all we need to do is to just tick this little button. So we have the automatic black and white conversion. This is what we got straight out of the box. This is the black and white representation created by Capture One. And this is where all our fun begins. So if we just compare, so this is the automatic conversion, and if we just put beside the black and white conversion that I have created manually with a little bit more adjustments. So if we take a look at the layers panel, you can see here that beside turning the image to black and white, which I have done in the background layer. If we take a look at here, you can see that this is enabled. Here I was manipulating with the red and yellow colors, but apart from that I was working with HDR, I was working with curves, and this is what we are going to do with this image. So that's the difference basically between just a black and white conversion, which you can do either in Capture One or with any software. So as you can see, the image is quite flat, it's just boring and not appealing at all. And now the whole artistry is to just focus on the most important, on the most beautiful elements in the image and play them so they will be stronger and put the rest in the background. So this is a creative process and it always requires some steps, but the effect is very dramatic. This is something completely different comparing to the automatic black and white conversion. So let's just get back to our image and let's get back to our black and white tool. So as I've mentioned before, apart from switching this option on, turning the image to black and white, I'm going to manipulate with these sliders. So let's for a moment again switch it off and let's see what kind of colors we have in the image. So which sliders I need to touch to manipulate with the black and white conversion, what will make sense here. So typically when I'm working with portraits, obviously the red and yellow sliders are important because the mixture of red and yellow creates the skin tone, so the skin tones live here. So I would go for brightening the red. I will just move it towards the right. I think something around 20 should be sufficient. So this is before, this is the after, very subtle difference. And when it comes to the yellow, I'm going to go to the opposite direction. I'm going to go to the left. And I think this might be a little bit too much. Something about -71. So this is what happened when I was manipulating with these two sliders. There is not much of a difference because in the image we have actually plenty of blue, and we might go and correct the white balance, but I don't feel that it makes any sense in case of this picture, because when we move forward we will take care of the background on a separate layer and I don't need to take care of color at all. This is something very special when you are working on black and white conversion, and it's something different because Capture One is known for its color editor and for the beautiful, amazing colors you can produce, and actually you are getting beautiful tones, color tones just right from the box. But in case of black and white conversion, of course, this is not needed. You can focus entirely on luminosity adjustments, on textures. Okay, so let's get back to our workflow. We have changed the base characteristics to portrait. We have adjusted auto levels. So now let's create new adjustment layer where we will target luminosity adjustments. I want to have them on a separate layer so I can fine-tune them and I can switch the layer on and off to see my before and after, which would be a little bit more tricky if we would do everything on the background layer. So let's create new field adjustment layer and let's quickly rename it to luminosity. Okay, so here let's first take care of the background. We want to have the subject as prominent as possible. We want to have the face, especially the right part of the face and the hand, brighter, and we want to push everything towards darker tones. So that way we will add depth to this image. And this is very clearly visible that that bright background is very, very destructive. So let's just make it darker. And in order to do this, I'm going to actually use the advanced color editor. So we can maybe, let's just jump back to the background. Let's switch off this and I'm just going to super quick take the advanced color editor and sample the color in the background, because I will create a mask for the specific color and then I will darken the area that will be inside the mask. So here this color is quite strong, it doesn't appear in the face, so I can fine-tune the mask, but this is a very quick way of darkening the background. So I'm just going to click here, and let's just click on this icon to include all the saturation, and that's it. So now I'm just going to click on those three dots and select create masked layer from selection. So capture one is calculating my mask, and this will be visible here. So if I hit M, this is my mask. So of course it includes a little bit too much, so actually I'm going to make it one more time so you can learn from my mistakes. Okay, so let's just switch this one off and let's sample again. So I'm just going to switch off the mask, click here, and let's have a preview. So this one I'm going to delete. Let's hit on this little minus icon. Again, let's include the whole saturation range and let's have a preview. So everything that is grayed out is not included in my selection. Everything that is in color is included. So you can see that all these areas, all those parts of the hands are included here. So let's try to manipulate a little bit. So if I go this way, this helps a little bit. So we will have to refine the mask and probably work a little bit of manually. Okay, that's fine. Let's again click on those three little dots, create masked layer from selection, and now our mask is calculated. Let's hit M. This looks a little bit better. Let's zoom in, and I'm just going to use quickly eraser. So let's hit E. And right click, let's make the size bigger. Flow, we can go for almost 100% because I'm 100% sure that I don't want to have these areas included in my mask. I don't want to make these areas darker. So what is visible now in red, what is highlighted in red, will be darkened. So of course I want to just get rid of everything that is visible over the face and over the hands. Okay, I'm working quite fast. For the sake of this video, I would be way more precise if I would be working on this portrait for print, but I just want you to get the idea. Okay, here I need to be careful because I want this part to be darker. This is part of the background. Okay, so I have removed the mask from here. And now we are going to use super cool feature available in Capture One. I'm just going to right click and select Refine Mask. This is super powerful. Just remember to switch on Display Mask so you can see what is going on. So you can see if you go to the left, the mask is as we have created it at the very beginning. Now if I push it towards the right, it gets more and more precise, it gets refined. So this is calculated by Capture One algorithm. So I can hit apply, and let's now jump back to our luminosity layer and let's just copy the mask from the top layer. So I'm right clicking and let's select copy mask from adjustment layer 1. So now we have our mask here, and let's get rid of this layer. Okay, so this is our mask for the background. Let's just hit M to switch off the preview of the mask, and let's switch off the preview of the selected color range. Now we can go back to the background and let's switch on our black and white conversion. Okay, so this will be actually our background. Let's just rename it to background. Here on this layer we will darken the background. So again, this is our mask, and let's use curves. I just want to get rid of the mask from the eye. I've seen that there is a little bit of red highlight. So let's get rid of this overlay and make sure that the face is not going to get darker. We don't want it. We can get rid of this here as well. Okay, let's zoom out and let's hit M again, and now let's move over to curves. So we are on our background layer. Actually, I have created the same name as underneath, so this is quite confusing. Let's just add the word darken. Okay, now this is way better. So here I'm going to go to the curve, and it doesn't matter if you would go for RGB or Luma because we are not affecting any colors. This is going to be only black and white conversion. Okay, so here, having our mask added to the layer, we can create just one control point and drag it downwards, so that way we are making the background darker, and you can see already how dramatic this change is, how much it affects the portrait. So now the subject stands out way stronger than before creating this layer. Okay, so this we have ready. Let's just add a little bit maybe of the mask here. Let's just fill in, because actually it's not red at the bottom. Let's just go for the brush, and oh no, let's reverse, and we need to zoom in just to get rid of this little darker color here, so which means that we are not covering this part. So I'm just going to fill it in, paint with the brush. Okay, let's zoom out and let's again hit M, so that way we have switched off the overlay, and this is our image before and after darkening the background. Okay, let's move over and let's start working on luminosity in our portrait, in our black and white conversion. So I'm going to add new field adjustment layer. I'm going to change the name to luminosity. And here I'm going to start luminosity adjustments with the HDR tool. This is a super powerful tool and it can work really miracles. So first of all, I want to recover maybe some detail here in these brightest areas in the face. So let's touch a little bit on the highlight slider. So I'm going to the left, and if I go to the right, it will make the highlights brighter. It doesn't actually make such a big difference. So I'm just going to keep the highlight somewhere around here. I would say that I'm making these adjustments, to be honest, quite automatic, because in case of this portrait, they are not bringing me any difference. So, okay, you can skip it. Typically, this is really important to visit the HDR tool and see what can be done. Here we don't have any super strong highlights. If you take a look at the histogram, you can see that we have plenty of shadows. The left hand side of the histogram represents darkest tones, blacks and shadows. In the middle we have midtones, and on the right hand side we don't have very strong highlight. So that's why we didn't get any difference when we have touched the highlight slider, but it is important to remember that it is there and always try to see what is happening, what is this slider affecting. For sure we are going to go and use the shadow slider, because I would like to just introduce a little bit more of contrast in the midtones. So I'm just going to make the shadows brighter here. So I will push my shadow slider towards the right hand side, not much, just a bit, just to get a little bit more contrast. So those darker parts are getting brighter. So this is before and this is after adjustment. You can see that the difference is very little. I went just for 9 and already this is again before and this is the after. Now let's jump into our curve, and this is the most important tool always when we are working on luminosity adjustment. So here we can work with really high level of precision and we can target super precisely all the luminosity ranges. So you can use the picker if you would like to work on particular ranges in the image. I'm going to work quite intuitively and I will just create the classic S-shaped curve and then I will readjust. So if you would like to be super precise, and for example if you would like to increase contrast between, let's maybe zoom in, that part that is brighter in the image, his forehead, this darker and this brighter part, you might use the picker and you would create the first control point sampling in the darker area and second control point sampling in the brighter area. So here you have created two control points. The one that is on the right is for the brighter part and the one to the right is for the darker sample. Now, if I push this point lower, if I push it down, this will darken the selected luminosity range, and if I push this one slightly upwards, this will create contrast because I will be pushing those tones towards brighter part. I will be brightening them. So you can see that if you want to be precise, this can really make huge difference. Because typically if you are just working on a general picture and if you are sort of in a rush, it always works if you would go for the S-shaped curve. You can as well use a ready preset. This is a tip from me. So here you can go and Capture One provides you with a ready preset. So you can go for points on all channels, you can go for contrast luma, and now I'm not even clicking, I'm just hovering over and I see the result that Capture One is generating. So contrast RGB, this is contrast on luma curve, midtones brighter, midtones darker. So you can use these presets without even creating any control points manually. And to be honest, I quite like the contrast that I'm getting with the contrast luma. If I just get back to what I've done, it's quite similar if you compare the shape. So if I go for contrast luma, this is just a little bit stronger and I'm going to go for this. So I'm not showing you those presets just for the sake of showing them. They are really useful and they can save you plenty of time. So I'm just going to go for this one and we have our S-shaped curve. So I quite like the result. So let's just zoom in, let's put our curves back here and I'm going to revisit my background layer and see if it makes sense to make the background even darker. Actually not, I might just remove some of the darkening effect here from the hair because I don't like that it's darkening that much the hair, and this is not true, it shouldn't be like that. So let's hit M and I'm just going to go for eraser. We can maybe go for slightly bigger size and let's go for way lower flow so we can just gradually very smoothly remove the darkening from the hair. So we can switch off the preview of the mask and just work directly on the image, so that way we can actually see what we are doing here. I'm working with a mouse at the moment. I have a tablet just beside, but it's easier for me to scroll with the mouse, and just for this moment it's enough. So you don't need necessarily a tablet if you are working on general adjustments like this. If you want to be fast, sometimes a mouse is more than enough. So tablet I would use definitely if I would be working on something precise, if I would be working on dodging and burning, but in case of this image we can see that just the classic S-shaped curve is enough. So we got this very beautiful contrast, we got that very beautiful light, we got the shadows, so there is no point to add another layer and work on dodging and burning. And the other reason for this is that this is male portrait. So I really like working with portrait of men because here I don't need to worry about the wrinkles. There are no skin imperfections that I would feel that I need to fix, that I need to remove. If that would be a portrait of a woman, I would probably work on those little marks on the face, and I would just feel, to be honest, a bit of a pressure from the side of the model. And when I'm working with men, there is no need at all. So they are always happy when they look masculine. This is a portrait of my friend Krzysztof. I hope he doesn't mind what I'm saying, but basically that's true. I've done a lot of male portraits, and as long as the shot is nailed, as long as they look confident, masculine, they are happy, and then they don't care if there are some wrinkles. They actually add a man character. Okay, so on this layer we've been working on luminosity adjustments, we've been working with the curve, we've been working with the HDR tool. So now I'm just going to take it a step further, and since, as I said, I don't need to be afraid of adding texture, and I'm actually tempted to add a little bit more clarity. So on this luminosity layer, I'm just going to play around and push my clarity for positive value. So I'm just going to keep natural, and let's go and add some mid-tone contrast. So with the clarity, you will always add punch to the image, you will always strengthen the texture, and you will create stronger contrast in the mid-tone. So this is before, and this is the after. So all these little things under the eye here, those lines, this is getting stronger, but it adds beauty to this portrait in my opinion. So again, this is before adding clarity, this is the after. So I went for quite a strong value. Let's maybe go for something lower, 25, and let's see if we add a little bit of structure as well. So I feel that it really works in case of this image. This is always very subjective. You might want to have this sort of images softer, and definitely I wouldn't recommend adding structure when you're working with portraits of women. So just remember, you can add maybe to some fabrics if you would like to emphasize texture of the dress, or maybe especially jewelry or hair, but never do this to the skin. But in case of male portrait, you don't need to worry about this in general, and this works here very well. So this is before applying our luminosity adjustments and the after. Okay, I'm going to add another new adjustment layer, and I'm going to target specifically eyes of the model. This is what I do sort of as a routine, and I wouldn't do this if he had very bright eyes or if the eyes were very well lit. But as we remember, if I just hit Y, we are working with a really badly lit portrait with very bad light. The image is actually not even sharp, so this is 100%. I'm on a retina display, so I can take a look at 200%. So the image is really soft, it's not sharp, and it's badly lit. So I'm going to spend a little bit time, actually it's just going to be a few minutes, but I will target specifically the eyes. Okay, so let's just do this. I'm going to add new empty adjustment layer, and I will quickly paint in the mask. So let's just rename this layer to eyes, and let's zoom in. So I'm still working with the mouse. Let's just hit B for the brush. Let's decrease size of the brush, and let's go for quite a high flow, and let's paint here over the eye. Let's hit M to see the preview of the mask. Okay, we have a little bit of lag here, but the computer that I'm working on is quite strong, so I should be able to do this. Typically I would have about 10 or more. There is a limit for the amount of layers you can have in Capture One. I believe this is the number of 16, I don't remember right now, but something like this. So you can have max 16 layers in Capture One, and normally when I'm working I just like keeping things tidy and organized, so I would have about 10-12 layers, so that way I can just fine-tune the image very quickly. I'm very often changing my mind about the adjustments, I'm changing my mind about colors, and I'm creating always endless amount of variants. So this sort of workflow when you have adjustments on separate layers is very, very helpful. If you would have everything on the background layer, that would be just a mess. So that's just a tip from me. Okay, so we have our mask, and typically what I would do here is to go for the HDR tool and push shadows to the right hand side. Now let's zoom out. We just want to see the whole face. Never be tempted to, okay, you can be tempted, but don't do this. Don't just work on the eyes while looking at such a big close-up, because it just doesn't make sense, because then the eyes will look fake. So okay, this is already too much, something like this. And I like adding a bit of clarity. This will darken the eyes, so I need to find a balance between shadow and clarity. So if I go for stronger clarity, this, as you remember, will add contrast in the midtones, so this makes those eyes a little bit sharper, sort of crispy. And now I can go for a little bit more in the shadows. Let's see before and after. So this is very bad if you go and overdo this, if the eyes look fake, but I feel that now they are looking quite good. The overall image is quite dark, so it works really well to have these nice highlights in the eyes. So again, before and after, and as you can see, this is really helpful having all these adjustments on separate layer. I'm just going to push it a little bit further, and I can always get back and fine-tune it later if I decide that the eye is too bright. Okay, and now I'm going to actually quickly change for the tablet, because I want to quite precisely add a little bit more brightening here in this area. So the eye is quite dark here, and I want to very softly paint with the tablet. So I'm just going to right click. Okay, there is something strange happening. So let's go for the brush, right click, and I'm going to increase the size and go for very, very little flow. I want to be very subtle with these sort of adjustments. So let's just paint a little bit here. Remember that we are now working with the HDR adjustment. We are brightening the shadow. So I've just done a little bit of touches here. So this is how the mask look like, and if I switch this off, you can see that there is already some difference visible. Of course, I'm not going to retouch this completely. I'm not going to make it very brighter, but just a little bit, so there is a little bit more light here in the face. Okay, maybe if we zoom in, that way it makes the work easier, because I'm looking at the whole face, and this has to work in balance. It has to be treated as the whole portrait. It has to be treated as a whole face, not just the close-up of the eye. Okay, so I'm quite happy with what I have achieved. Let's again take a look before and after. I will just add a few touches here as well. So I'm using the left square bracket to decrease size of the brush, and let's just very, very slightly move over these areas and maybe over his brow. Okay, something like this. So let's go before and after. So eyes are super, super important when you are working on a portrait. As you can see, just anything you do that brings the viewer attention towards the eyes will strengthen your portrait. If you manage to capture some beautiful lights in the eyes, then half of your work is already done, or even more. But in case of this picture, we have to put a little bit more work. Okay, but I think this is enough. So again, before and after. Okay, so on this layer we have targeted the eyes, and our black and white conversion is almost ready. So I'm just going to go for one more layer when I will add film grain simulation and sharpening, And on the very last layer, as some super touch, I will add a little bit of color tint. So this would be the classic black and white conversion, but I want to show you how super quick, super easy you can use the color balance tool to add a color tint to black and white conversion. So let's very quickly add one more fill adjustment layer. You could actually do this on the background, but let's just have it separate. So I'm going to rename it to Sharpening, and let's just jump quickly to the detail tab. And now it is important to take a look at the image at 100% or 200. So depending on your needs, if you would like to export the image, always remember, enable your process recipe and then use the proofing tool. So right now I'm just going to, let's maybe go for 200% and let's sharpen the image first. So here I'm just going to go for quite a strong sharpening because, as you remember, the image at the very beginning was super soft, and we already are getting some artifacts here, but I don't mind this at all. I want to go for the classic look, and the image already has a bit of a vintage look, so I will just balance those artifacts that are visible here by adding the film grain simulation. So here underneath we have film grain. I like using Silver Ridge a lot. It is actually the algorithm that is standing behind the Silver Ridge is better, is more precise comparing to the fine grain, comparing to the first one. So you can experiment, but I like using this one with quite strong values, so you can see how it very nicely balances the sharpness that I have added. So this is at 100%, and now I can have a preview if I just switch off the layer. If I would add the sharpening and film grain on the background layer, actually just sharpening, because you can't add the film grain simulation on a separate layer, it will be always added to the background layer. Let me just quickly show you. So if I'm here on the sharpening layer, and the film grain is visible here. There is the impact that I have added, but if I go to the background, it will be visible as well. So this is always added by Capture One to the background layer. There are certain things that cannot be applied on separate layers. So as you know, you can't add black and white tool to separate layer. This is always happening on the background layer. The same goes for the film grain, and the same goes for vignettes. So I'm just saying quickly out of my head what I remember. So film grain is on the background, but sharpening was added here on this additional layer, and I can now have a quick preview. So this is before sharpening, and this is the after. So when I have just applied the sharpening, it might have looked like a little bit too much, but actually if you now switch it off, the image just looks a little bit too soft to my liking, and I really like going for this a little bit stronger contrast. And we can of course revisit our luminosity layer, and we can go to our exposure tab, and here we can even touch the contrast slider. So here it is, exposure, and here let's maybe add a little bit of contrast with this slider. So the fact that you are using curves doesn't mean that you can't use contrast. This works quite well. This is not an option, as some of you might be thinking that the pros are using curves, don't even touch, don't even go close to these sliders, exposure and so on. No, they can be used as well. They are very useful, and especially if you are working on color, it's quite a useful slider as well, saturation, because you can just decrease saturation and won't work on colors. You can do this much faster than if you would go for creating separate layer and changing saturation over there for the whole image. That was just a digression. Okay, so I have added a little bit of contrast here, and I think it works quite well. So just to show you that you can use those tools as well. Okay, so on that layer we have added sharpening, and at this point we have added film grain simulation. I'm not saying on this layer because it's on the background layer. So we have already our classic black and white conversion. If I hit Y, this is showing me the original image, and this is what we have achieved after our luminosity adjustments. I want to take it a step further, and I want to show you super quick how you can add a tint, how you can tint black and white image with color balance tool in Capture One. This is super easy, super fun, and I'm sure you will like it. Let's add new field adjustment layer, and let's just rename it to tint. So here all you need to do is to just jump over to the color tab, and let's find our color balance tool. Here it is. We can pull it out so we will have a little bit more precision. And I want to go for the super classic combination that is typically used in color grading. So I will add a hint of blue. I will inject a little bit of blue into the shadows, and I will add a little bit of orangey yellow to the midtones. I want to keep the highlights neutral. So let's maybe start with the midtones, and here I will go for something like this. I want to add a little bit more of those creamy, nice warm tones to the midtones. Very useful thing is here you can use those sliders that are to the right and to the left. So basically the color balance tool is sometimes treated as something that can be used for very quick color grading, and if you want to go serious you would go for the advanced color editor. And this is actually not true, because color balance tool has this very specific feature for this tool, and this is the slider to the right. With the slider to the left you can control saturation of the color. So I have sampled something like this, and if I go now here, you can see that this little circle is moving towards the outside of the circle. So I'm increasing saturation. I want to just leave it as it was before, somewhere around here. But the super important, super helpful feature actually is in this slider, and this affects the luminosities. So if you would go now towards the bottom of this little slider, this will affect, remember, the selected luminosity range. So here you have shadow, midtone, highlight. We are working now with midtone. So if I go down, I'm darkening the midtone. So you can see that in this portrait, this is not really helping, because we've already done a lot of work and we have adjusted luminosities in the face. We have already that very beautiful three-dimensional effect. We have added depth to this image. So by darkening the midtones, I would actually work against of what I have achieved so far. But I just want to show you that this can be super useful when you want to work with color. And for example, very classic use of this slider is if you want to make a skin look more tanned. So you would go for orangey, sort of golden tone, and to make the skin look tanned, you would darken the midtone. So this will basically darken the skin tones. Okay, so let's just go to the initial position. If you would like to do this, just double click on the slider. So we have added by now this warmer tone to the skin tones, to the midtones, and now let's jump to shadows. And as I've mentioned at the beginning, I want to inject a little bit of blue to create the color contrast. So as you can see, just by moving this circle towards the blue very slightly, it already created this beautiful color contrast. So again, this is before, this is the after, and maybe the midtones are a little bit too strong, so I want to be precise. So I won't be moving, I won't be dragging the circle. I will just go to the slider at the left and I will adjust saturation here. So I want to go for a little lower saturation. Always remember that you have the option of manipulating with opacity of the whole layer. So we have now our color tint here. This is before, this is the after. So apart from manipulating with the mid-tone shadow separately, I can just go lower with opacity value, and now the tint is almost invisible. So let's just go back to 100%. And now I feel that the image is still a little bit too cool. Let's zoom out and let's just go for master. So here this will unify. If I add any color with the master slider, this will add sort of color cast to the overall image. So now you can see that in the midtones we have this warm tone, in the shadows we have this cooler blue, and maybe it is harmonious, but I feel that the image will benefit by adding another color in the master tab. So let's go for something warmer, and let's add maybe a little bit of this yellow orangey. As you can see, this is very subtle, but this affects mostly the background. So maybe something like this. So I feel that this unifies nicely both the shadows and midtones. And here we can, in the midtones, we can move back so the face won't be that yellow. Okay, so we are basically done. Let's just go back with our color balance tool. If you would like to see your tinted black and white conversion beside the classic one, all you need to do is to just right click and create clone variant. So now you have both of them, and so now at this point they are identical, they are the same. So all you need to do is to just switch off the tint layer in the one to the right, so you can see that this is the original version, black and white without any color grading, and this is the one with a tint. So okay, I can do this just forever. I'm never happy with the colors, and I would just manipulate really for ages. I really enjoy this. I love working with color in Capture One, even if I'm working on black and white conversion. So I feel that this will be a little bit more effective if I go for those purples. Yes, this is more harmonious. Before there was a bit of a clash, in my opinion. So now I think this creates still depth, this adds still color contrast, but it's way more harmonious. Okay, so we are done. This is our black and white conversion. Let's maybe switch off the tools. We don't need them at this point. So this is our classic black and white conversion. We haven't added any tint to this image, and this is our black and white conversion with some tint added. So you can see that super quick you can create several versions of the same image. So now you can just take it as a start and you can continue. You can create another clone variant and you can continue working on the image. Okay, so that's it. As always, if you have any questions, just feel free to ask under the video in the comments area. I would really appreciate if you subscribe to my channel, if you enjoy this sort of tutorials. I'm very happy when I hear from you. If you would like to learn more about Capture One 20, I have a comprehensive course on Capture One. So the course consists of 4 modules, and I'm covering everything from the initial setup. You don't need to know anything about Capture One. There is the setup, there is organization, there is editing, and there is batch processing. As a bonus section, I have included the hands-on training. So you have more tutorials like this. I'm working on female portrait, I'm working in depth on color grading, I'm working on landscape, and I'm working in a different way with the use of Luma masks on another black and white male portrait. So feel free to check the course. The link is under the video in the description area. And thanks for watching. This was Kasia Zmokla from Digital Art Classes. See you soon.